what's happening here. Anyway, let's take a few minutes, go get some tacos, and then come back and do talky things. Sponsors! Yay, sponsors!
It's cool.
Really?
It's gotta be running live. It's gotta be running
I don't know if that's important. Something I don't know.
No, it looks like there's
It's money. Millions of dollars.
Technology to KVM is the library that was created in 2011 by a consortium of companies, including Google and all the big companies back then. Let's create a virtual hub, a library for the foundation. It's going to
We'll actually text it.
Did he? Yeah. I don't know.
They basically killed the internet. So they did. The library is awesome, and you can work with it through Vert Manager, or if you like the GUI, and then if you like the command line, just use virtual shell.
I usually use like Vert Manager, or usually I just use like Proxmox. The long command is kind of a bit of a pain to type out. Does this have to have like a templating system, or like something like Docker?
Firecracker?
Will I?
I haven't investigated enough to know the answer to that question.
Am I not enough for you, Brandon?
So, you know, you have to do like me and do some Googling about firecracker templates.
It's just me doing things to figure out.
Well, see, usually we'll let it go, no one else knows. Oh, it looks like,
Yeah, everybody can.
I guess it looks sort of similar to,
Grab the chapter.
guess that looks sort of similar to core.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot like that. But I mean, it's really stripped down. So, but it's still VM, it's still KVM. To get all the security benefits of VM with very lightweight VM.
Which thing was again? Yeah, I'm sorry, I was actually asking. I'm assuming I'll graduate next one. Oh, you're USC. Graduate? I'm like, graduate USC. Sorry. Next one. Okay. Probably, it comes and goes. I just not bad.
Plus the white noise.
So Sean, he'll change jobs.
Okay, so like.
I only know because Will.
She's not sending butter with the option.
I don't really know.
She left group one, and now she's with Cisco.
I think she likes her mom.
Yeah, she does. She's a watch
There's no going back. Once you go get remote.
Yeah. I mean, she's
Yeah, I
got
don't think,
10 kids now.
I just know.
Yeah.
See, I just don't have the interaction with them.
One of the guys that was the customer that he hosted on the B side.
Yeah, I think I go into a deep depression if I work there.
My buddy got an internship and then yeah, okay, we're gonna get the internship.
Well, his mother-in-law staying with him. I do that smart.
Yeah, they're tapping.
Oh, wow.
Well, I invited you to go to work.
Not work.
Well, Friday I'm on my way to DC, but Thursday.
Should do a little sort of. I thought that was gonna be like cybersecurity or something.
We jump around for like an hour.
I thought about bothering you the other day.
Look, let's look at knowledge program for now.
I was like, I'm since like over your house.
Should I remember? Yeah. Yeah, so I got the watchdog name.
It's me. Going right in feedback.
I'm plus user.
Oh, I got a
It's pretty good.
Yeah, both games.
You said 28.
That's decided I did like.
How much was time?
I thought how to do it really was.
I can't say I'm a fan.
I haven't played much. Just did like the first mission. I had to break out of baseball stadium. Hack the camera. Point at the switch.
Yeah, I got like 3 or 4 hours into it. I was like, I just don't want to play this. Like,
I think the partnership with my man. Somebody used to.
I don't like Madden, but I couldn't. I was like, yeah.
you just got one. They were passing to South Carolina.
I ended up doing Miami. That's probably my problem.
They talked about it's just insane.
Better my son gets like hooked on these things.
Isn't your son like 2 years old?
Like now
You play Madden already?
he's hooked on the Ravens. And now it's like this. He's been playing a whole lot against people as the Ravens. But we play offense, and on defense, I get to call plays, and then he like moves the joystick around and completely like whistle and blocks. Full teamwork.
It's pretty cool.
We're still competitive.
So you work 100% work from home now?
Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah.
Really?
It's rough.
A little stir crazy?
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of interaction either with my coworkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going back to work. I work from home. You work from home? Yeah. I'm not going back.
Theoretically, I don't have a lot of I actually have a lot of money.
60-40 sounds good.
Sounds pretty good.
I would have stayed like once every 3 months or something. But and that's because I get really desperate by that. Okay, I got to so really, it's fine.
Do you have like a home office you can get to if you really wanted to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you could be around other people if you wanted to. That's good. That's a nice option.
We'll see the other difference. I work 10-hour days.
I'm supposed to
I do. I remember reading about that.
So, no kidding. Yeah.
Hey, release you to do your thing.
Works for me.
Cool.
Everybody online hear me? Bueller?
Yep.
Yeah.
The sound's coming through your speakers in this meeting. But if you unmute it, it's gonna have echo.
Which if I unmute it will have echo?
Yeah.
Alright.
Feedback through the mic, through that mic.
Okay, so let's leave mute then. Alright.
I'll check. I'll make sure that. I think I will. Let me see. Jeff said yes. 719. Yep. So you're good.
All right, good to go. All right, so we'll be doing a presentation tonight on TTP sparring, which essentially is just taking a look at tactics, techniques, procedures we currently see in the wild, or currently see at my current job in the wild. Oh no. So a little bit about me. Currently, I'm a detection engineer at Red Canary. Who here hasn't heard of Red Canary? All right. So to fill you in, Red Canary is a managed detection response. It's more like a very siloed MSSP. So, you know, usually you go to someplace like SecureWorks, you feed them a bunch of logs, and you might get something useful. Essentially what we do is we actually dictate the logs. In our case, we use just pure EDR platforms. So Carbon Black Response, CrowdStrike Falcon, Endgame, things like that. So we focus a lot on endpoint telemetry, detecting things that way. Got a bunch of certs, GCIH, GCC, GSEC, a bunch of them SANS. If you really want a huge list of them, I can give it to you afterwards. Also mention I am a SANS mentor instructor. So before we get started, it might be important to know what TTPs actually are. And this is the way that I've defined it, and this is usually the generally accepted way of doing it. So the tactic is, you know, the means that need to be employed to accomplish your objective. If you come to me and say, Brandon, I want to eat an egg, my tactic, for example, might be to cook that egg. The technique is the methods used to perform that function. So that gets a little bit more specific. So that's the way I cook the egg. Sunny side over, scrambled. That would be my technique. And the procedure are the actual steps. So get out the Teflon playpan, get the spatula out, crack the egg. So there is a subtle difference here between these three. A lot of times people tend to confuse procedures and techniques. Procedures is a systematic step-by-step, very detailed. Technique is just something that's kind of like a subcategory underneath the tactic. So in our case, you know, your tactic may be getting that initial foothold. Your technique might be like a Maltop in the phishing campaign, or maybe like a malicious link that's going to launch some JavaScript. And your procedure is actually the tools that you're going to use, kind of how to set all that up. So next question is, why should I really care about TTPs? I've got all these tools, all this other stuff, I've got all these IOCs. Why should I really care about TTPs? Well, the big reason is defense in depth. Who here wants to give me a good definition of what defense in depth is? What you think defense in depth is? Anyone want to venture a guess?
Yeah, you use different layers of security. So you start the port with your firewalls, IPSs, and the more in-depth you get into your environment, then you use other security appliances or tools, products to add more layers of security to your environment.
That is usually the textbook definition. I like to break it down a little bit more. Most of the time when people talk about defense in depth, they usually talk about firewalls, IPSs, a bunch of protective tools, which is all well and good. But really, to me, the defense in depth is a combination of things. It is protection in depth,
So like having those protective tools is detection in depth. Some things you're not ever going to be able to block. We'll touch on that in just a minute. And then of course your response procedures. When protection or, whenever your protection fails, whenever you get a hit on protection, like, AV says, I removed this malicious software, how do you respond to that? The question is, if AV picks up something and removes it and deletes it, how do you know that's not pretty much like a implant from lateral movement? How do you go about responding to that, investigating that? How do you handle that? Now, the reason I define defense in depth as protection in depth, detection in depth in this way, let's kind of look a little bit in detection theory. So over here we have our pyramid of pain. Everybody familiar with the pyramid of pain? We'll go over it real quick. So the pyramid of pain is something that came up from David Bianca. And what it is methods of kind of detecting adversaries and how painful it is to the adversary, also how painful it is to us as defenders to get detected. So at the bottom, we have what we call, towards the bottom, we have the easier indicators. So hash values. That's very, very easy to detect. You can pretty much throw it in any kind of tool, find hash. IP addresses. So a little bit higher. Once again, you can do firewall logs, NetFlow, a lot of ways to use IP address. Domain name sits a little bit higher. So for example, if you burn a hash value, an adversary can use tools like MSS Venom. They could run it through an encoder. They can pretty much pack it. There are multiple ways they can change that hash value of whatever their endpoint is, whatever their malware is, and still be the same malware, but that hash value is no good. IP addresses. We live in the cloud environment now, especially with places DigitalOcean. At the click of a button, I can change an IP address. Block my IP address, I click a button, good to go, yeah. Domain address, domain names, that's a little bit more of a pain to them. Hence the reason it sits kind of here in the middle. You block my, my domain name, now I've got to go register a new one. I might have to pay or not pay for it. Depending on what that top level domain is, you might have already blocked it. So there's a lot of things there. Also, there's a lot of infrastructure costs on setting up that DNS for those domains. Then we've got our network host-based artifacts. So these are artifacts usually left by specific tools, or you can find by using specific techniques. Then we have the tools, which is a little bit higher level. It's very, very hard in most cases to discern what the tools are from certain artifacts. And at the very, very top here, we have what we call TTPs, techniques, and procedures. Now that being said, a lot of our tools kind of operate here at the bottom. Hash, IP addresses, domain names. Well, a lot of your threat intelligence feeds focus on. It's a lot of AV. A lot of times when they see certain network connections, it's based off IP addresses and domain names. A lot of your botnet trackers, IPS, IDSs. They all kind of live at this lower level. We kind of define this in detection terminology as signatures. These are signatures, and signatures, if you haven't heard, are very easy to bypass. Up here a little bit higher, network artifacts, tools, and TTPs. We call these analytics. There's some other words depending on the vendor. You might hear heuristic, you might hear behavioral indicator, couple different names, but in general, you have your signatures, which are very, very specific. They typically have a low false positive and a very high false negative. So meaning, if I detect on a hash value, there's a very, very, very small chance that there's a hash collision. So that's actually not something that is not malicious. But once again, it's real easy to run this through and encode this and change this hash. So I could be missing tons and tons and tons of other malicious stuff if I'm just focusing on hashes. Now up here, kind of our analytic level, analytics are much more broader. They're harder to kind of nail down. And because of that, we typically have a much higher false positive percentage. We also have a lower false negative. So we get a lot of false positives, but we don't miss as much as what we do at the lower. Now, ideally, without touching too much on detection strategy, you're going to use kind of a mixture of signatures and analytics And there are ways to kind of optimize this stuff, like using like ROC curves and whatnot. If you really get to like signal detection theory, we're not going to touch too much on that. But the big point is most of your vendors kind of focus down here at the signature level. Does anyone want to take a venture guess why?
Easy.
Because it's easy. The other thing is it's really, really expensive. Have researchers go and research all this stuff, pump out all this stuff. But there's another reason. How would your company feel if your firewall started blocking mission critical stuff? Probably not all that great. Most vendors, especially ones that offer like more protected platforms, they have to really try to watch their false positives. Because if they do have a false positive, you're essentially creating like a denial of service against the business. That's not really good for their business model. That's a good way of having to have a phone call with like, the company CISO about yanking all that stuff out and going with another vendor.
You actively perpetrated one of the attacks you promised to prevent.
Correct. So it's also one of those things with their business models. Now, we're starting to see more and more companies kind of do more detective stuff, and they kind of exist up here, doing more analytic stuff. So like an IDS and stuff, IPS. So they're providing you like a bunch of information, but they're not necessarily taking action on it. But then you also run into the problem at this level, once again, that the research to reduce that false positive amount and make it something that's actually actionable for your SOCs or for your security teams is very expensive. The other thing is that a lot of these analytics, developers who don't necessarily have like the best programming practices, a lot of times will emulate some of these TTPs and emulate some of these host-based artifacts. So once again, it might be a legitimate process based off your environment. You don't know whether or not you can tune it out. So this leads to the whole alert fatigue problem that we really talk about today a lot. So the other reason, and probably one of the biggest reasons that you should care about TTPs, is that MITIRE's done a lot of the hard work for you. They came up with what they call their attack and pre-attack platforms. And they've pretty much mapped out a lot of these tactics and techniques and procedures that these adversaries are using. And they've actually came up with some very rough analytics as well. And if someone's done all the work for you, why not utilize it? So, we're going to start with TTP1. And I had some demos prepared for tonight, but my wife took my beefy laptop. So there won't be as many demos as what I hoped. So we'll try to drag this out and make this pretty useful. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me at any point in time. So TTP number one that we see a lot, maldocs. Should come as no surprise to anyone. Phishing's rampant. Maldocs is something that we see a lot of. So the tactic here is initial access. So we pulled up MITIRE ATT&CK framework. Over here on the left-hand side, there's what we call initial access. That's the tactic that we're after. There's a bunch of techniques. One of these techniques, spear phishing attachment. And here's T1193. If you're really interested, pull up your phone. You can Google MITIRE T1193. They'll bring up and also list out, no threat groups that do it, tools that are associated with like generating maldocs. There's a bunch of them out there, dime a dozen. MITIRE does it. A lot of like these phishing frameworks will generate maldocs for you. Sample procedure here. You're just creating a listener in MITIRE. You're just taking that listener, you're staging it as a macro. Pops out this beautiful code for you. You just simply open up a Word document, new macro, copy in there, save it, ready to go. Attach it to your emails, start mass sending them out. Now, protective controls. A lot of these protective controls are probably stuff you already have in place. Email sandbox being one of them. So, Proofpoint has this. Palo Alto does this with Wildfire. A lot of your next gen, like firewall vendors, are doing this type of stuff. So that's one protective control you have. Another one, blocking macros with GPO. Who wants to venture the guess or why this might not be necessarily feasible in all cases? What was that?
People are using macros in their document.
People are using macros in their document. You do see this a lot in law firms, especially with people in accounting and whatnot. So a lot of businesses are kind of like, you know, they don't really like this. You can use things like WMI filtering or GPO targeting, and you can kind of target certain users, certain groups, and stuff like that. So if they're not one of these groups that use macros, you can block it and reduce your attack surface. That's the big thing about a lot of these protective controls. It's not necessarily that you have to stop everything, but just reducing the attack surface is a big point. The other thing is endpoint protection platforms, EPPB or EPP. This is kind of like a new spinning thing, spin-off from the EDR, so the endpoint detection response stuff. So like CrowdStrike, Falcon, in-game, a lot of these people have that EDR detection capabilities, but they are also now offering some of these protection, kind of like the next-gen AV type stuff. So that's another control for you. The detective side of the house, event ID 4668. Anyone familiar with that event ID?
That when a new process is started.
Yes, that's the process create event ID. It's a part of the advanced Windows logging feature set. So in order to get these, you actually have to go into GPO under audit settings, and you actually have to configure this to get all these events.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Sure.
Why? Why wasn't that turned on by default? There aren't going to be that many events.
Well, for 4668, there actually would be, because anytime a process launches on the box, it creates an event log. And when you think about all the processes that
So that's not service installed. That's service started.
Yeah, that's process installed, not even service.
Got it.
So anything on the box that starts.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that is a good question. A lot of people often ask, like, why doesn't Microsoft turn on some of these more advanced logging features? That has to do a lot more with like the way Windows logging works. So Windows logging works based off what they call channels. You know, we'll say there's like close to 400 channels now. The problem is that if you turn on all 400 channels, and let's say you want to have, you know, something like OSSEC or something pick up these logs and ship them off, or even like Windows Event Forwarder, it can actually, by default, there's a limitation with the way the operating system works. It can only grab like the first 255 channels. So if you turn them all on, it's just going to go in alphabetical order, grab the first 255, and you're going to lose all the other vision. The other thing is there seem to be a lot of system administrators, network administrators out there that get all bent out of shape whenever you turn on this kind of logging, because they're like, oh, so much process overhead, you're eating up so much of my precious disk space. Even if you have circular logging on, you try to argue with them, a lot of times they just don't listen. So I guess the big reason is there's a lot of pushback from them. There's a lot of kind of technicality stuff that goes into it. The other thing is sysmon. Is anyone here running sysmon in their environment? One, sysmon is a beautiful thing. If you're not running sysmon, you really need to jump on this wagon. It's a free tool by Microsoft. It's part of their system internal suite. It can pretty much detect all kind of crazy stuff. So you can detect named pipes, which is used for detecting things like Cobalt Strike and a lot of other malware out there now. So you can actually detect that inter-process communication via named pipes. Process starts, network connections, DLLs that are loaded by processes. It's very, very robust. You can do a lot of like great things with it. I want to say there's like 11 types technically of things you can detect. Some of them I can't recommend that you actually use because they do have like a big performance impact on the box. For the most part, if you just stick with like ID1, which is like process start and stop, 7, which is like DLL loads, 3, which is network connections. You stick with like a handful of basic stuff. There's really performance is negligible. The other thing is there's some great like pretty much configurations already out there. The big one people like to use are the Swift on security one. It's on our website. You can just literally Google Swift on security. Sysmon, find the config out there, grab it, deploy it. Super simple, super easy. Scales very well. You can deploy it with group policy, SSEM. It's really a great thing.
It makes me super happy that you plugged Swift on security at this meetup.
Yes, Sysmon, like I said, it's a godsend. Now, if you've got a little bit more money to spend, you just hate Microsoft, You can, of course, go with endpoint detection and response, so EDR platforms. So this is like the Carbon Black of the world. This is the CrowdStrike of the world. You do get a little bit more like better feature sets. Essentially, these platforms also have like their own SIM built in. The problem with Sysmon is it's just opening up a channel of like the Windows bit logs and piping it in there. So then you have to get those logs off the endpoint, write SIM rules for it, stuff like that. These EDR platforms, like I said, they kind of have like a web front end. They're collecting it for you. It's very easy to do like queries and stuff like that. So there are some drawbacks there, but with a little bit of, you know, elbow grease, you can get Sysmon to work just as well. Especially with things like Elastic Stack, or if you're already leveraging something like Splunk in your environment, or you know, you already have a SIM. Now the thing is, okay, Brandon, that's great. I've got this event ID 4668, Sysmon ID1. I've got this EDR platform. What do I do with it? How do I find this? Well, right here, I've got you covered. So we're looking for the parent process to be WinWord, because of course we're looking for a maldoc. So it makes sense that WinWord, which is what reads all your Word documents, is going to be the parent process there. So Sysmon, we have what we call parent process. Of course, so that's pretty there. And 4668 is actually called creator process if you're in Windows 10 or if you're on server 2016. If you're on anything before that, so like Windows 8, 7, they actually don't give you the name of the process to launch it. They actually give you like a GUID instead. You have to map that GUID back. So there's a little bit of like extra elbow grease there where you actually have to take that GUID, take that GUID, match it up to like another like event ID 4668, and then pull it out that way. So there is a little bit of finagling there. Microsoft has fixed that with the newer versions of their OS. And if it's an endpoint detection response, like I said, like usually it's just parent process or parent. So we're looking for WinWord being the parent, and then for the process itself being PowerShell or command or circuito. Now here's an interesting thing. Why would WinWord launch circuito? Should it? So let's first define what is circuito. You got any sysadmins? Venture a guess what circuito is?
I don't remember. I've used it in the past.
Yeah. So circuito is a utility that's built into Windows and it's for managing pretty much like all the CA certs and whatnot on the box. Now, one of the things you can actually do with circuito is you can use it as what we call a harness. So harness essentially is a kind of like a program where you use it like a dropper. So you use like an application, go grab something else that's malicious. So instead of putting our malware actually in the Word document, where you know it might be a little easier to detect, we might be giving up some OPSEC, whatnot, we can actually go and stage it someplace and then use this harness to actually pull it down. This also allows your document to be a little bit more modular. So in the middle of a campaign, all I've got to do is I've just got to go back to my server, wherever I'm using that harness to pull it down, and I can change my malware on the fly. So if I'm dropping one type of malware and I discover my target, their AV's picking it up or they have some way of detecting it, just on the fly, you go change that malware, whatever that implant is, and it's still those Word documents. I don't have to resend the Word documents out. The Word documents that haven't been opened, or if they're reopened, we're just going to grab that new implant malware, pull it down, and run it. So your circuito does have that functionality. It's very, very interesting. A lot of times also with circuito, you can actually encode stuff with base64. So you can actually encode your malware, your implant, and then use circuito both to decode it and to pull it down from the internet. Other common things are PowerShell and command. MITIRE. You guys familiar with MITIRE? So MITIRE's like the world's nastiest banking Trojan. Terrible malware, period. You read a lot about it in the news. Essentially, this is how MITIRE gets on the box. They usually send, right here at Christmas, they actually send out fake Christmas cards, Word documents. Of course, you just click it, open it. Got to click the macro to see your like pretty Christmas card. You click it. What it essentially does is it runs command prompt, then goes and launches PowerShell. PowerShell is both encoded and obfuscated. that PowerShell goes and downloads an exe and then saves it with a random numeric name in the public directory, and then executes it. And then from there, that starts the whole chain with Emotet. Emotet like injects itself into other processes. The other thing is it uses SMB and named pipes to move laterally in the environment. And essentially what it does is it injects itself in your browser, and it'll display one thing on your browser. And what it's doing in the back end is actually doing API calls and manipulating the browser kind of like by scraping it. And it's moving money out of your investment accounts or out of your bank accounts in other places. So it's a big financial crime thing. You can go like underground forums and actually, buy some of this malware and like use it to finance yourself. It's a huge like underground criminal market. The other nasty thing about Emotet, and then we'll kind of move on to the next one, is Emotet is polymorphic as well. So you'll see Emotet spawn itself all over the box in multiple locations. But as it's spawning and writing itself over and over and over again, it will make small changes to the application itself, so the hash will change. So a lot of customers we deal with EDR, one of the cool things you can do is you can actually block hashes. So it's the opposite of whitelisting, you're blacklisting hash. And you're essentially what it is a benevolent rootkit. So you're putting a nice rootkit in, and what you're doing is you're shimming all the syscalls from whatever that application is that you block. What's really nasty with Emotet is Emotet will constantly change its hash, and the way that you're blacklisting it is based off hash. So you'll block the hash, Emotet will be like, oh man, I can't do anything cool. But I'll just write myself and drop it here with a different hash. And that new hash then allows itself to super nasty. We see a lot of it, unfortunately, with a lot of our incident response cases. But it's probably the #1 perpetrator we're seeing right now with this Maldoc stuff. We also see a good bit, as I have here, Empire. We see a lot of like targeting, especially with kind of like script kiddies and some red teams using Empire, then using Empire to use their listener and then get their initial foothold that way. TTP2, Squibbly Doo. So this is kind of an interesting one because it's got a random name. And Sub T, Casey Smith, actually works for Red Canary. He's the guy who actually discovered this. I've never actually asked him about how he came up with this name or how this name came about. Someone said it had something to do with like him playing with his kids. And his kids called it Squibbly Doo or something. But essentially what this is this is a method for both defense evasion and execution. It's our tactic. Our technique is essentially we're just abusing register. Kind of like a sample procedure here. Is you have like your initial payload. Then you're essentially using kind of like regserve as a harness. So we're calling regserve to download and execute an SET file, which is a Windows source component file. And we're using this scrobj.dll. And that scrobj.dll is kind of where the Squibbly Doo thing comes from. Protective controls. Emmet. You guys familiar with Emmet? You got one? So Emmet is a older toolkit Microsoft release. It is the Enhanced Mitigation, I can't remember what the other E stands for, toolkit. Unfortunately, it's kind of dead. Microsoft no longer supports it. They've taken this and either built it into Windows 10, where they force you to kind of buy like their awesome security suite whenever you do like the new Office 365 stuff, and force you into E5 license. But if you do want to download like an old unsupported Emmet where you're running an older operating system, the Emmet attack surface reduction, so ASR, you can actually make rules and you can limit to what Squibbly Doo can, or this regserve can do as far as like going out to remote sites and pulling it down, so you can actually reduce the attack surface that way. A lot of your endpoint protection platforms also have the ability to identify this and will block it automatically. If you do have the nice Windows Defender, Advanced Threat Protection, E5, Super Security stuff, they have now moved the attack surface reduction into that, so you can do your attack surface reduction rules into that. But if you're doing that, you're probably working for a pretty beefy enterprise with lots of money to spare. And I don't know if really anybody around here that I've talked to that will openly admit that their enterprise is on Office 365 E5 with all crazy super advanced security licensing and whatnot because it's super expensive. OPSEC, man.
I was gonna say the pricing on that though.
Yeah, I want to say E5 is like $35 a user, plus like the security package is like another like $15 a user. And then a lot of times they're also like adding all additional stuff onto that too. So you're talking like 50, 60 bucks probably a user easy.
Per month, right?
What was that?
Per month, right?
Yeah, per month.
Right.
That's correct. So detective, once again, event ID 4668 is your best friend. You can detect like 90% of like all evil with that. Sysmon ID1, once again, your best friend. Notice I also threw 7 in here. So 7 is image loads, or depending on like the vendor you're talking to, they also call it mod loads, so loading in modules. And then once again, like, you know, you can use pretty much any kind of like EDR tool. You can almost, whenever you see Sysmon, you can almost substitute EDR in if you want. Now, once again, what's our query here? Well, essentially in this case, we're just looking for regserve.exe and the command line containing anything with that scriptj.dll in. Super simple. Now, if you're going to go with Sysmon ID 7, you're pretty much just looking for any kind of image load in that field with scriptj.dll. That's a little bit more false positive. Might have a little bit more of a false positive there. In my testing, I haven't seen any, but just be familiar with that. Any idea why you'd want to use a Sysmon ID 7 over 1 or both of them together? Anyone want to venture a guess? I have the choice of writing a detection based off this one up here with Sysmon ID 1 or the Sysmon ID 7 stuff. So look at the pretty much like the image loads, the DLLs is being loaded into that process. Anybody want to take a guess on which one's better or why you use one in one case and not the other? What was that? I can't hear you. You have to speak up.
The top one is more obvious.
The top one's more obvious. That's correct. So a lot of times, especially even with like some of this LOL bin stuff, attackers will bring their own tools to the party. So what they might actually do is they might actually download like regserve and put it in a non-standard place, and then just completely rename regserve. They might pack it to change the hash, and then they might strip all the metadata off. So it's really still like regserve 32, but they're bringing their own tool to the party, dropping it somewhere else instead of trying to make a tool to use this harness. So one of the ways you can actually catch them and make your detection a little bit more resilient is you can look at this. So you can look for this DLL being loaded. If anyone's curious, scrobj.dll is a DLL that's used to register source component files as COM objects, so you can make COM calls to it. So that's always something when I started like getting into like more of this endpoint-based stuff and these more advanced detections. I was kind of interested in what some of these DLLs did. So just a little bit of a knowledge bomb, I guess you can say there. If anyone has any questions at any point in time, feel free to like stop me. This is very kind of informal. So TTP number 3. This is kind of an interesting one. PowerShell injecting a PE, so portable executable, into memory. So this isn't quite like process hollowing or anything like that, but does fall in that fileless malware vein. So our tactics here is defense, invasion, and execution. Our tactic, if you notice here, is a little odd. It is both process injection and PowerShell. So this has to do whenever, if you get very intimate with the MITIRE ATT&CK framework, there are definitely some pitfalls to it. One of the pitfalls is that PowerShell itself is just a technique. So is like Python, just about any other scripting language. But the problem is that they classify technically PowerShell as execution. The thing is, you can do all kind of crazy things with PowerShell. PowerShell is like a whole world unto itself. In fact, you can use PowerShell to implement probably like 20 other like techniques on the matrix. So the thing is, essentially PowerShell, that tactic itself, the way that MITIRE classifies it, is overly broad. It's something that they're kind of trying to work on. They're trying to maybe come up with like some sub-classifications for PowerShell and whatnot. They haven't quite figured out how they were going to do that. So this is a good example because it kind of shows some of that stuff out there. So Protective measures. PowerShell constrained language mode. Anyone heard of that? So let me ask you this. Has anyone used PowerShell to call like native like .NET objects?
Yeah.
Yes. So PowerShell can call native .NET objects as well as it can execute C# code. The way it does this is by like talking directly to the Windows API. This is the same way that a lot of your malware also functions. So Microsoft came up with, I want to say in version 3 of PowerShell, what they call constrained language mode. So what this does is it whitelists certain .NET commands that you would call natively from PowerShell. So the idea is like you as a sysadmin might want to use certain .NET libraries or make certain .NET calls to automate things, make your job easier and whatnot, but you don't necessarily want to have access to everything. So a perfect example is like you don't necessarily as a sysadmin want to be able to call the memory stream to inject stuff in raw memory as a sysadmin with PowerShell. Like why would you want to do that? So constrained language mode is actually a way to kind of like whitelist and blacklist some of these .NET calls. And so you can find kind of how a lot of these tools and whatnot work. The other thing is constrained language mode will break a lot of the red teamer tools like MITIRE, PowerSploit, a lot of these like frameworks rely heavily on this .NET stuff. So right off the bat, that usually breaks a lot of this stuff. There are bypasses for constrained language mode, so do be warned on that. But it's pretty robust overall. The other thing is PowerShell just enough admin. You also use this abbreviated as JEA. So this actually goes and you can actually set up rules and stuff like that and whitelist certain PowerShell commands based off user and endpoint and whatnot. You don't want Sally in accounting going and using PowerShell to call WI and pretty much enumerate all the stuff on her system. I mean, why would Sally in accounting need to be looking at the processor architecture and stuff on her box, or looking at hotfixes that have been installed on her box? But Joe in IT, that might be a normal function for him. So you can actually whitelist some of these PowerShell calls as well. So it's about reducing that attack surface. Once again, just like constrained language mode, there are bypasses for it. Just enough admin actually includes constrained language mode. The other big one, remove PowerShell 2.0. Anybody want to take a guess why we're removing PowerShell 2.0? Uninstall it.
Vulnerability.
What was that?
Vulnerability.
Not vulnerability, but close. So this really isn't too much of a protective control. It's more of a protective control and protecting your detection. So PowerShell 2.0 and prior has no logging capability. So a lot of your red teams now, whenever they want to run any of the PowerShell stuff, because Microsoft has done an awesome job as far as creating detective measures and protective measures for PowerShell, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just load in PowerShell 2.0, still run all their tools, bypass everything. Constrained language mode doesn't work in 2.0. Just enough admin doesn't work in 2.0. So one of the big things is a lot of people still have 2.0 installed. You just uninstall 2.0, that removes the attack surface. The other thing that they'll commonly do is they'll install 2.0. That's kind of when we're getting down here to the detective. You can actually just look for installation of that 2.0 as well.
And when you deploy like 5.0, that's going to replace, that's going to peel out 2.0, right?
No.
No.
So when Microsoft went from 2.0 to 3.0, like the engine on the back end changed. And instead of replacing it, they left 2.0 in place for compatibility reasons. And 3.0 is just essentially it's kind of built in. So even if you're running like the 3.0 binary, you can just put in version 2.0 and it'll load all the 2.0 like DLLs and stuff like that on the back end and still execute.
Huh. Okay, research to go do that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. If you're interested in any of these protective capabilities, Microsoft has an awesome blog on it. Microsoft loves the blue team. They go really into depth about all this stuff and these controls, as well as give references to other blogs that they've written about some of these controls. So that's a really good thing I recommend. The other thing is AMSI capable AV. So Microsoft came out with, I want to say like 3-4 years ago, with the anti-malware scan interface. So what this is Windows actually built in an interface to detect malicious PowerShell and how it's being ran. And they opened this API for other AV vendors to use. Unfortunately, only a handful of AV vendors are actually using this. So I want to say like Symantec is one of them. Defender, of course, is one of them. Kaspersky is one of them. And I want to say there's only like one or two others that's actually utilizing this. And this is a big reason why whenever you're launching like malicious PowerShell payloads, Defender, Symantec, and Kaspersky like usually catch just about all of them. Now, once again, there are ways around this because it does work based off signatures once again. Dave Kennedy has been doing like a bunch of like keynotes like this past year where he pretty much talks about like using Unicorn and Defender or some AV vendor using Unicorn and him just going in and just pretty much taking its code and just breaking it up by adding like variables but still keeping like the bytecode, staying the bytecode array, bypassing it that way. So still not robust, but does a lot of good, a pretty good job out of the box. The other thing is layer 7 firewalls or IPSs. With a lot of the stuff, there's not a whole lot you can do from the network side. But a lot of your layer 7 firewalls are actually pretty good at identifying like PowerShell whenever they're downloading this stuff. And a lot of times, whenever you see PowerShell injecting the PE into memory, they've actually got the PE like base 64 encoded, and they just load up on a web server or even pastebin. And so they're actually going and they're doing a PowerShell new object web client dot download string. That download string is actually what loads it into memory. Where if you use the download file, that's what's actually writing it to disk. So they use the download string to load it into memory in PowerShell. Then they're executing that in PowerShell, that pretty much that base 64 encoded PE, and then injecting it into the process, their choice that they've been programmed into that logic. But a lot of your IPSs in layer 7 firewalls now can identify like PowerShell reaching out and trying to download things from the internet and kill that. So that's a very strong control from the network side. Now, going back to the network or detective side of things.
Can I ask a question?
What was that?
Maybe a quick question.
Sure.
I see like a lot of vendors try to sell sort of like endpoint security that tries to like mark applications or processes that like won't matter. But it seems like you can just use Sysmon to like automate this yourself and save yourself the trouble of purchasing a vendor.
Yeah, so you don't even really have to use Sysmon. Like Sysmon does do a lot of this stuff, but you can actually do it yourself by just turning on auditing with the pretty much like the Windows firewall. Like you can just have the Windows firewall. I don't recommend it. It's like completely wide open, allow everything open. Your Windows firewall is actually an application like firewall, so like a layer 7 firewall. And that's actually one of the ways I've actually mapped back what applications are actually like talking out in the behavior based off of the network that way. Is I can have like a net flow record of this IP address to this IP address, take that template of the source and destination IP address, the ports, and then like the protocol, map that back to a Windows-based like firewall log, and you actually get the process that like launched it that way. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of like companies that on the endpoint side that are talking about doing this. Early on with some of these endpoint products, they actually got caught by Microsoft because what they were actually doing was they were dropping Sysmon on the box and was using Sysmon to actually do the detections, which violates Microsoft EULA. So early on with a lot of these endpoint products, they were actually using Sysmon to do these detections until Microsoft blocked them. But yes, Sysmon pretty much, like I said, it's very, very robust. Anything you do with like a page like Carbon Black, you can do with Sysmon with a little bit of elbow grease, and then kind of like a SIM or data analytics platform on the back end. But you can still use something like Elasticstack or Elk or whatever you want to call it. I think they prefer to go by Elasticstack now. And once again, it's still free. So now the detective side, we're still using the event ID 4668. You can also use 4104, 4105. So 4104 and 4105 is actually when you enable PowerShell logging. So this is another thing that unfortunately doesn't come out of the box. You have to enable it. But PowerShell logging, this is the event block logging. So a lot of times whenever you're doing like these crazy like encoded commands and stuff like that, base 64 encoded commands, with the event ID 4668, it's still base 64 encoded. It's like a bunch of garbage. Like you have to like copy it out, go into something like CyberChef, decode it. There's a lot of hand parsing, trying to understand what actually went on. With the script block logging in PowerShell, PowerShell actually does all that decoding for you. So as like PowerShell runs and walks through, like I need to code this actually means that, stuff like that. Right before it executes, it'll log it. So it's more or less clear text. So you don't have to spend 20, 30 minutes actually trying to like decipher all the craziness in it. So that's a big thing I do recommend as well. And Sysmon ID 1, once again, goes hand in hand with this 4668. So if you're relying on something like Sysmon ID 1 or the 4668 process ID, really kind of like these this first query is kind of what you want. So you're just looking for the process being PowerShell and the command line of that PowerShell being, wildcard, capital A, capital, pretty much like the string here. Now, if you're curious what the string is, this string here is the base 64 encoded version of memory io.memory string, or io.mem technically. And this right here, because like I said, in 4668 and Sysmon ID 1, it hasn't decoded it. You can just look for this string here, and that correspond kind of like I said, that correspond roughly to the IO mem here. And that's how you can detect it without actually having to like decode it and whatnot. Now, if you're actually working off the 4104 or the 4105, because it is doing a lot of that heavy encoding for you, you're just looking for that new object IO memory string attribute. The other thing you're looking for is this crazy one right above it. H4SI AAAAAA wildcard. Now, does anyone want to guess why it doesn't decode like this crazy string, or why this crazy string would like appear in decoded PowerShell, the PowerShell event log? Anyone want to venture a guess? What was that?
Invalid character.
So it's not an invalid character. So a lot of times with like these memory string objects, they do gunzip or gzip compression on them. And if you gzip compress PE, portable executable, and then you correspond like the hex values, well, if you gzip it in base 64 encode it, and then you compare those values and map it out to what normally a PE is, all your PE headers are going to start with H4 S capital I 7A's. So that's like easy way where if you ever see that string in anything, to identify this base 64 encoded gzip portable execution file. It essentially refers to the MZ header that you normally see in all PE files. That's essentially what that is, gzip and base 64 encoded.
That's awesome.
What's also really fun is to go to places like Pastebin, because there are a lot of attackers still out there that will like stage their stuff on Pastebin, and you can just pop the string in Pastebin with like PowerShell, and you can find people's all kind of like staged malicious PowerShell code. So if you want to learn how to like decode malicious PowerShell, this here's a great way to do it. And like I said, I've already kind of covered the new object IO mem string. This corresponds to if you're working with that 4104 or 4105 log, because it's already decoded.
Is there ever a moment when you would use that in a non-malicious way?
Yes. Advanced persistent adware uses it.
That's a non-malicious.
But technically it's not malicious.
I'm sorry, it's advertising. It's malicious.
I have not seen it used in any non-malicious way, personally.
Yeah, it seems like
the idea is like this is a way for if you were going to do hot patching on Windows. So if you want the hot patch code into memory and to execute like this new code without having to like reboot the box and stuff like that, this is how technically you would do it. There's not a whole lot of people that's hot patching like processes and executables and DLL memory.
Yeah, thanks. I'll reboot my boxes. Thanks.
Yeah, so at Red Canary we monitor like 500,000 endpoints, and I've never seen this not used maliciously. So
okay. Yeah.
I think it's a pretty good sample size. I don't know, maybe not.
Those are about the ratios I was expecting. So,
and this actually goes on all the time. In fact, this here's like the #1 way that we catch a lot of like the Cobalt Strike stuff. Cobalt Strike, whenever you use in PowerShell, is like a harness. This is essentially like literally how it does it. So a lot of times, like it's either pretty much if you see this most of the time, it's like Cobalt Strike or it's Metasploit does the same thing. And usually it's a good way to pick up like, okay, there's a pen test going on this customer side, or oh my gosh, there's something crazy going on this customer side.
There's either a pen test or a
shit's hit the fan,
Actually,
like
right.
sound the siren.
It's a pro bono pen test.
yeah. Free shit test, courtesy of Russia.
So TTP number 4. So I wouldn't really call this common, but I would call this more of an emerging trend that I've noticed. It's LSAS spawning either like a command prompt or PowerShell, or some kind of like implant that they've done so to give them like a reverse TCP shell. So this tactic technically is execution persistent. Because of the way they're storing it, it's actually like an LSAS driver, or they're using like DLL like search order hijacking to get this to work. So both executes their pretty much their implant or whatever they're using as kind of like their shell to execute code, and also LSAS pretty much launches whenever the user logs in. So it's a good way to have that persistent there as well. So this technique actually maps to the LSAS driver. So T1177, if you want to like read a little bit on it. Like I said, it's been relatively rare. Here, I'd say in the past like 2-3 months, like we've gotten a bunch of like IR engagements through Kroll. So we partner with Kroll, and the way Kroll works is Kroll just goes in, deploys carbon black everywhere, sends all the data to us, and we pretty much do a lot of the heavy lifting, and then Kroll just like rips the boxes out of the wall. This is the way a lot of other like kind of like CrowdStrike does incident response as well, and this is the way that CrowdStrike operates as well. They just pretty much install the CrowdStrike sensor everywhere, because your EDR platform pretty much is like a flight recorder on the endpoint. So you can see every network connection, every DLL loaded, every process loaded, what's going on. So it makes incident response really, really easy and very clean and quick. And you can deploy a lot of this stuff, like I said, with group policy, just shipping as an MSI, installing it that way, or SCCM. So we've been seeing this kind of a lot. Detection-wise, once again, event ID 4668. We've got a lot of Sysmon ones on this one. So we've got Sysmon 1, 3, 6, and 7. And then, you know, of course, your EDR stuff there. Any kind of EDR platform. Essentially, if we're looking for any kind of like EDR platform, what we're really looking for is we're looking for the parent process to be LSAS with 4668, Sysmon ID, event ID 1 for any EDR platform. And then it making a network connection, so it's calling home, doing a C2 beacon for someone to actually have like hands-on keyboard access to some IP address that's not RFC 1918. RFC 1918, if you're unfamiliar, is pretty much like the standard internal stuff. So 10.0.0.0/8-sider, your 172.16.0, you know, all the standard like internal addresses, your private IP address space. Your Sysmon 6 events are your DLL loads. So what you're doing is you're essentially going your baselining before this happens, like the normal DLLs that's loaded by LSAS. And what you're doing is you have your baseline there, and then what you're doing is you're iterating through every DLL every time LSAS is loaded, and you're comparing it to that baseline. LSAS is a very, I guess you can say like stale, I'm not quite sure the right word to use for that. It doesn't change a whole lot, so you should never see new DLLs being loaded by LSAS. If you do, essentially it's DLL search order hijacking. One thing to look for as far as like detection. The other thing is Sysmon ID 7 is the pretty much like the new kernel drivers being loaded. So you're looking for new like LSAS kernel drivers being loaded by LSAS as well. A lot of your kind of like EDR platforms also have a way to monitor for that. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking for here. Now, looping back up to protection. Your protective measures essentially are LSA protection, which is essentially just a registry key that you can kind of change in Windows. And you can Google LSA protection. And essentially it's a registry key. You change that registry key. And the only thing, as far as driver-wise, that can be loaded into LSASS has to be signed by Microsoft. So that stops unsigned drivers being loaded by LSASS and essentially like dumping credentials or creating kind of like this implant or shell that LSASS is calling. The other thing is credential guard. So this goes and puts a lot of connections around what can talk to LSASS and how things can interact with LSASS. This also kind of doubles as like a Mimikatz kind of attack surface reduction as well. So this is actually built in kind of the new Windows Defender, exploit guard, credential guard, that whole thing. Credential guard and exploit guard are actually free, so you don't have to get like the super expensive like Microsoft Defender advanced threat protection to do stuff. Like you can do this, you know, with regular professional 10 licenses. And then DLL Safe Search was something I didn't even realize existed probably until like 2 years ago. So this is actually just going through and it's changing the way that essentially whenever you're looking for a process, the way it looks for DLLs is it looks in its local folder first and then works its way out based off like environmental variables looking for your DLLs. So a lot of times the way you do like DLL search order hijacking is you just get your DLL, name it to whatever DLL is looking for in the Windows System 32 folder, and just drop it in that local folder of whatever the process is, and it'll load that before it loads the System 32. This actually, enabling that actually puts that local folder lookup last. So it makes search order hijacking much more difficult.
Hey, I got a question for you, Brandon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
The LSA protection, do you know if Mimikatz can bypass that currently?
Yes. So one of the jokes with Mimikatz and a lot of the protections that Windows has put in the Mimikatz is a lot of times with those registry keys. And the joke is that if you get Mimikatz and you're running Mimikatz on the box, you already have to be interactive to like pull those passwords like out and reuse them elsewhere. So a lot of times all they do is they just go in, they just flip that registry key back.
Ah, okay.
That's another detection strategy for a lot of these defensive controls, especially in Windows, that rely on you like enabling registry keys or registry keys being set for certain settings. Is even with Sysmon, you can kind of monitor processes in the registry keys that they're touching and modifying. So what you do is you just write rules in your sim or whatever you're using to look for any process that's touching these registry keys and modifying them in any way. So there's a way to detect if someone's playing with it, but no, a lot of times, like essentially all they're going to do is this is going to go in, they're just going to disable whatever your defensive controls are to get around it.
So, but do you know if Mimikatz can bypass it by default, or would the attacker have to actually know to flip that key?
I believe the official way that if you go and you read all the documentation for Mimikatz, they just tell you to flip the key. I think that's one of those things that's so low of a hanging fruit that they haven't really tried to like build any kind of like bypass around that.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I do know like they built in a number of years ago like bypass. It used to be you had to Mimikatz would only work if you had like debugging privileges. And a couple of years ago they changed the Mimikatz code where you don't even need to have debug privileges now to like read LSASS and dump stuff. So it's usually like the big things, the major pain points are hard to like hard for people to bypass in other ways that they actually build in the Mimikatz to answer your question.
Well, thanks.
So this right here is where I was going to do like a bunch of demos, but like I said, my wife took my like beefy computer to work with her today and left it. So a lot of the stuff with these TTPs, I just gave you like 4 like really interesting kind of like common TTPs we're seeing. But there's a whole like list of crazy stuff. I'll see if I can actually bring it up real quick that MITIRE has. But essentially, there's these testing frameworks out there that already map to certain MITIRE like techniques, tactics, and procedures. You've got Atomic Red Team by Red Canary. It was actually developed for us internally for like testing like a bunch of our detectors and whatnot. They open sourced it and released it to the community. Kind of like really caught on. So now in-game has RTA, you've got MITIRE release Caldera, and you've got Uber that released Meta. Risk IQ is like one of these attack breach simulation companies. It's not open source or free, but you know, kind of works that same thing. Like you can just Google attack and breach simulation companies, and they pretty much work the same way. These are ways to test both your detective and protective controls. So they're really cool. Most all of them, with the exception of the Red Canary Atomic Red Team, work based off agents, which are really, really nice because you can automate and push it based off an agent. Ours, like I said, we call it like an atomic test, so it's like a unit test, so it's very small. You're just testing one thing. We do have methods and ways for you to like chain stuff together, so you can like emulate like a full-scale attack. RTA, Caldera, and Meta kind of do this out of the box, like I said, with the agent. There's also some drawbacks to that. For example, Caldera, last time I set it up in the lab and used it, Defender and like a dozen other AVs would like flag the agent as a Trojan and would delete it. So you have to do like a little work with like the AV engine. In-game RTA, I've never had any problems with the agent, but the code's kind of gotten a little stale. Like it's not as heavily maintained or active as I would like. Meta, I haven't really like dug into, so do that at your own risk. Atomic Red Team, like I said, that's kind of what I'm familiar with, but that's because, you know, shameless vendor plug that's going to work for them. That's kind of what they created. Let's see real quick if I can bring up the MITIRE site. Well, people online can see it, but no one in here can see it.
You have to duplicate your screen.
Okay, duplicate it.
Win peak,
I'm glad you know that.
and then it should then duplicate.
Awesome.
And I don't think that breaks the string. That doesn't break the string. Life is good.
The stream has not been broken.
Awesome. So so this is the MITIRE ATT&CK site. So essentially, it's just attack.mitre.org. And like I said, MITIRE has like broken all this stuff down, and they've got some white papers and stuff, and it kind of explains how this like maps to the Lockheed Martin like kill chain, your real big old models.
Do we have to cut them a check now?
No,
You said kill chain.
I hope not. But essentially, up here, kind of like this dark gray across like the top, those are your tactics. Everything that falls underneath it are your techniques. They don't really have much in the way of like procedures or anything like that, because procedures a lot depend on like, you know, the training and the tools that you're actually using. So it's really hard to emulate every possible procedure an adversary could have. But for example, like you can literally click on any of these, like count manipulation, and they give you like some high level stuff. They're gonna kind of tell you over here. I kind of focused tonight on like Windows based stuff because most people out there are Windows shops. They are like, you know, of course, like the stuff maps to Mac OS and maps to Unix and maps to Linux as well. But you know, all these techniques, they map to like Windows. Also, if you need like certain permissions to like initiate this technique, they've got that on there. In this case, this is administrator. They've got kind of like the data sources that you need also to kind of detect this stuff. Like I said, they don't really have like great ways of detecting necessarily, or they don't go very much in depth on that, but they do have like data sources for you to look at. They also have like contributors, so who like discovered it or wrote it, kind of like versioning information. Like I said, they got a little bit of a description there. Then they've got examples. So here are like a collection of like tools and ATP groups that are known to like use this this technique and this technique within this tactic. And of course, like all this stuff's hyperlinked, so you can look at meme cats, and I'll talk in depth about meme cats and whatnot. Down here, like I said, they have like little blurbs about mitigation. It's nothing super like in depth or anything like that, but it's enough information to give you a starting point. Same thing with like detection stuff. Then they have like a ton of references. Now, if you're for example, let's say that you don't live in a Windows shop. Let's say that you're primarily like a Linux or a user shop. You can actually just look at the techniques just for Windows. It used to be a lot easier before they changed the site here last a little bit.
I don't know that you can on their new site.
Yeah, the old site used to be like an old Wikimedia site, so it was really easy to change it. I haven't played much with the new site. I don't see where it is at the top, unfortunately. So David might be right on that. Another thing that they have, and they're still working on trying to flesh out, is pre-attack. So essentially, attack, if you're to map it to Lockheed Martin, it kind of starts there that initial that installation phase, and it goes to exploitation slash installation phase, and it goes from there. Pre-attack is everything beforehand. So there's actually this whole pre-attack matrix C as well. Here we go. So if you want to find the operating specific one, just go to MITIRE ATT&CK, click on the matrix C at the top, and then they've got their Linux and stuff like that, and you can drill down on it that way. There we go. But look at pre-attack. So this is pre-attack. So they actually go and they talk about how an adversary would go about planning, prioritizing, selecting their target, and stuff like that. And a lot of these techniques are a little bit harder to detect on. But you can detect on some of them with